Hey, welcome back to Cycle with Max. I'm Max McAllister. I'm going to do another video here on some of the finer, funner points of drafting that you can employ to, again, kind of make your day interesting and keep your mind occupied and sharpen up your skills while you're out on the road. So we've talked in a couple of previous videos about the basic positioning for drafting and feeling the wind direction and various tips you can do to employ to save energy while you're drafting. But what I want to talk about today is using the wind as a brake and using the wind to kind of maintain your position in a line of bikes. So again, some of the stuff I'm talking about here is more aimed at things I've learned from cyclists that are much more skilled than I am. And I'm sharing these things with beginner and intermediate cyclists so that you can understand these techniques, start to practice them, so that as you gain skill and become faster, when you'll already be able to employ these skills when you ride with better riders. If you continue to ride with beginner cyclists, you're not going to see anyone practice these skills because it just doesn't seem to be something they get involved with. And or on a lot of social rides, they're just not concerned about improving their skill. So you'll just find that nobody's going to employ these techniques. But if you practice them and you learn them, you'll be a better rider in that group. And eventually, if you gain speed and strength, you'll be able to fit in with more experienced cyclists more easily. So one of the things that's important as a cyclist, we've talked over and over about riding in a straight line, but past that is once you're in a group and you're riding in a group that has a shape and has an organization to it, it's very important that you keep your spacing in the group, your appropriate spacing. So you'll be riding two abreast undoubtedly, and depending on whichever line you're in, you'll get a gauge from the more experienced cyclists as to what's appropriate spacing based on the speed that you're moving down the road. What you don't want to be is the cyclist who's surging back and forth with the bike in front of you. Okay, so for a couple of reasons, this disrupts the line you're in behind you, and it's a sign that you're an unskilled rider, and then it alerts everyone that they don't want to ride around you. So of course you don't want to be the rider that no one wants to follow. So holding your relative place and keeping a steady pace is important. The second reason that it's bad is when you do these movements where you drop back and have to pull forward and drop back and pull forward, you're working harder than you need to. It's actually easier to keep a steady pressure over a period of time than it is to slowly drop back and go, oh, I'm starting to lose the wheel, and then have to pedal really hard to catch back up, and then, oh, I'm kind of resting, I'm tired, and oh, now I got to catch back up. That is the hardest way to ride a bike. A couple tips to avoid that. You'll find almost in any group, unless it's a really good group of riders, that the front third of the group will kind of hold the pace real steady and they'll be highly organized. The middle of the group will be working hard to stay with that group. And the back third will be the weaker riders, and they're collectively over time in the group, it gets more yo-yo effect. The further you go back in the group, the more of this effect there is. But in the back, it gets big, right? People are trying to catch way up, you know. So problem is positioning yourself in there. So if you're in a group that's running down the road, there's different styles. Sometimes just a couple of riders will pull for extended periods of time. So if you're not in a group that rotates in a highly organized fashion, which is unlikely unless you're riding with expert riders, so in most intermediate or beginner groups, two riders will pull for an extended period of time. So the further you find yourself back in the group, the harder it is to ride, because you're going to be surging constantly and whipping constantly. The group, and it may not be your fault, it may be the riders in front of you. So good advice is always try and find yourself in the top 50% of the group, and if not the top third if you can do it, because at that point it's safest. Because the riders will be more organized. Typically the more experienced riders tend to pull on the front, and you'll get less of the slinky effect, less whipsaw. Now, Some of the tips you can employ to keep yourself steady, obviously pedaling at a steady effort, but sometimes you might start down a hill or the group will start up a hill and the group starts to pack up. So there's some things you can do as you see those are happening. Maybe you start coasting down a hill. Naturally, if the farther back in the line, you're not going to be working that hard. Your bike might actually start accelerating up and is perfectly willing to pass this bike in front of you. So one option is dragging your brakes. Nothing wrong with that. But for fun, you can try and use the wind to adjust your speed. So you can do that in several ways. First of all, one is just sitting up really tall. When you stick your head up in the wind, your bike will slow down. And another way is to just move a little further out of line for the moment, right? Just move a little further instead of being 4 to 6 inches over. Just kind of come over a whole bike width. Now you're alone in the wind, and that wind will help control your speed. And if you're really coasting up too fast on the bike in front of you, you can actually bow your knees out if you want. So you can be sitting up with your knees bowed out and relaxing, catching your breath, and using your body as a parachute. So, and those are just fun things to pass the time. Now, by the time you're riding with expert riders, they're not going to be into having you do all that kind of stuff, so you're going to control your speed with your brakes. But it's a good lesson to learn how you can use the wind to your advantage and see the effects of it and understand just how much the wind affects the way you ride and how much aerodynamics plays a role in what you're doing. So, and then the next one is I always treat, say I'm catching onto a group or our group got separated at a stoplight. As I approach the group in front of me, they may be riding at a slower speed to allow the people that got caught at a stoplight to catch up, something like that. We got separated on a hill, who knows what. I always use it, there's a term in boating, you know, they say never approach a solid object at a speed you wouldn't be willing to hit it. You know, so in other words, don't ram your boat into a dock. It's not a car, it doesn't really have brakes. So I like to think of my bike as I'm on water and I'm floating up to the bike in front of me. And I basically, as I arrive at it, I want to, as I finish doing anything, my bike is going to be coasting at exactly the right speed, at exactly the right distance, because I've floated up here. So I didn't pedal all the way up furiously and then grab my brakes when I got to the bike. And the other one that's a bad thing to do is kind of get close, but don't get all the way. Because once again, if you leave that bike length in there, you're just getting wind in your face and you're doing more work than you need to. So go ahead and close that gap. Try and stay organized, you know, in a nice 2x2 fashion with the bikes around you, and employ some of these techniques I'm sharing with you, and just see how they work for you, and see what you can learn. So, all right, so there's some tips for the day. I'm Max. Please subscribe to my channel and share these videos with your friends if you enjoy what you're learning.